Product placement in video games goes back decades, all the way to the old arcade days. Ask your grandpa about it. More recently though, we're talking things like Mario driving a Mercedes, Norman Reedus pounding back Monster Energy drinks. Is that a fucking PS Vita? But whenever these conversations come up of the worst product placement in gaming, there is one game literally built upon product placement that is often left out. A game that not only is one of the most egregious examples of putting just straight up ads within their levels, but also shows exactly why it doesn't really work. At least not in the way you'd think. And that game is Homefront, a niche FPS over a decade old at this point that had the balls to do what no other AAA shooter on the market would ever dare to. It had a multiplayer map inside of a fucking White Castle. Released in 2011, back on the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, Homefront followed Call of Duty's formula to a T, with a short but cinematic campaign featuring a story about America conquered by an outside invader. Thus the name Homefront. I'm glad that we're all keeping up here. So, because Homefront took place on our home turf, so to speak, the developers thought it'd be a fun bit of immersion to include real, actual brands in-game to make us feel more at home, with the map Borderlands being probably the most prolific example. A standard our base versus their base design, but those bases just so happen to be a White Castle and a Hooters. Name a more classic American combo. Oh wait, it is genuinely eerie walking around the restaurants here, where they're all destroyed and abandoned, looking at the clean and repetitive ads for their 100% USDA beef and onion rings that are sure to make your mouth water. Although I do appreciate that the building itself actually is that iconic White Castle structure. You know, it's not like they just slapped some logos on a random building or anything. This thing was built from the ground up to sell cheap burgers in bulk. As for the Hooters, it's also pretty generic once you get inside. Although the colors definitely do fit the restaurant's vibe and gets me in the mood for some, am I gonna have to explain what a Hooters is? So for anyone outside of America or anywhere, I guess, that doesn't have a Hooters, they're a chain of restaurants that specialize in chicken wings and also hiring hot waitresses with certain... Honestly, it's really fucking weird. But even though these are the biggest and most in-your-face franchises on the map, there's also tons of smaller ads and other branding sprinkled throughout, like JanSport Corporate right across the street. Plus, all of these trucks have literal ads for companies like Lumber Liquidators, Rain-X, Nitrous Express, Gum Out. It's a lot of automotive brands, I'm noticing. But now, if you asked me back then, fresh out of middle school and chock full of business sense, I would have bet money that this was the future of gaming. We've all seen product placement in movies and TV, and I think most of us understand what's going on there. When you see a character holding a Dunkachino or whatever, generally it's a safe assumption that the agency behind Dunkin' Donuts has brokered a deal with the studio and or Al Pacino to include it. Or sometimes you luck out and the parent company is the same as the studio, so you don't have to work out a deal at all. You just get free advertising thanks to a little thing called synergy. But bottom line is, it's another revenue stream for the people making the thing. Remember, this was back in the day before microtransactions, when by and large, every dollar that a game made came from its initial sale at a retailer. And so I was thinking, you know, fast forward 5 or 10 years, and this might just be how game devs make money and stay afloat. I mean, Homefront must have made bank with all of those brands. They didn't make any money? Wait. So White Castle has been living rent-free in my head for the last decade, and they didn't even pay anybody for that? According to an interview that lead level designer and dentist Rex Dixon did with The Escapist around the time that the game released, they actually didn't receive any form of payment for those product placements, and actually had to approach brands and convince them that it was even a good idea to put their logos in the game. And evidently, White Castle and Hooters were about the only ones that actually said yes. And so, the devs' original dream of a perfectly realistic strip mall to clunkily putz around in was killed, and those few real brands that agreed to it just got shuffled in alongside some generic make-em-ups. But the thing is, Homefront might be one of the most egregious examples of product placement in gaming, but it is far from the only one. You got Final Fantasy making deals with Cup Noodles, Obama campaigning inside of Burnout Paradise, Alan Wake uses only the best Energizer batteries for his flashlight that famously runs out of juice all the fucking time. Warzone even had a partnership with Hummer back in the 2.0 era and included their new EV on the map, just 2 years after the same series had a partnership with Mountain Dew and Doritos to plaster them all around their maps. And while we don't actually know exactly what these deals look like and what money swapped what hands, with so many of them, I think it's a fair enough assumption that at some point, someone here has to have made something from someone. Was that vague enough to not get sued for libel? But still, this is far from the game changer that I thought it would be back in the day. And I couldn't really find a good, concrete answer as to why. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that I want these games to be littered with product placement. I'm not a supervillain. I'm just a little surprised, given just how many publishers seem to put their users' experience on the bottom of the priority list if it means that they can make a little bit of extra dough for their shareholders. Like, at this point, why not sell out to Breyer's ice cream or whatever? Like, is it not out of character for them not to be going down this route? Well, I actually do have 3 running theories. And first, it might just be a weird gray area when it comes to advertising law. Because at least in my experience, you usually have to disclose when you have a paid partnership when it comes to things like product placement. It's why you see creators will put the hashtag ad in the description most of the time. Unless they're just not feeling it that day, because no one's really checking anymore. And so, who the hell knows if this shit is actually legal right now and would actually hold up to scrutiny if ever taken to court? I mean, look, I'm no lawyer. I'm just a middle school graduate with a keen business sense and 3 White Castle cheeseburgers in my back pocket right now. And then the second reason is what I call digital graffiti. Once you put something into a game, there's no telling how players are gonna interact with it. And honestly, I can think of nothing that would get me to buy a Hummer less than being run over by one of them while trying to exfil in DMZ. Other than the fact that it is a fucking Hummer. Also, just from the creator's standpoint, brands often like to have the final say on everything with their name on it. So I could see how, for a game dev, it would just be a headache to try to ship a game while at the same time you're getting emails from someone from Wendy's corporate with a billion notes on how the particular shade of red that you're using for this blood splatter is a little bit too close to our brand's identity. Could you swap it up a little bit, maybe make them aliens and they bleed blue or some shit. Also, there's a secret 4th thing that I forgot about, and that is that people just fucking hate this shit. Every time that a company tries to poorly slide the shit in there under the radar, it's met with eye rolls at best and review bombings at worst. Like, this just can't be good press, right? And I think that just comes down to the deception of it all. You know, us gamers, we just don't like being lied to. I still hold a grudge against Robert Bowling for getting up on that stage that one time and telling us that Last Stand wasn't coming to MW3 when it turns out that's only because they renamed it. I'm still mad about it. I'm sorry. I know it wasn't you, probably, but like, you can't say fuck you Last Stand and then put Last Stand. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. But I think that if they really wanted product placement to work, they just have to be open about it, you know? Which actually brings us to the next part of my script. Adver games. These are games that were literally made to just be ads from the ground up. Like, you got Chex Quest, which is a Doom clone, but with a coat of cereal dust sprinkled on top. Yo Noid was apparently a 90s platformer meant to sell Dominoes. And there's Pepsi Man, which I think is self-explanatory. Then there was even an entire trilogy of Burger King games for the 360 that you could literally buy at a Burger King. Like it was just an add-on to your Whopper. Even as recent as 2019, KFC came to market with what they describe as the most delicious dating simulator ever created, titled I Love You, Colonel Sanders. One of my favorites, though, is the America's Army franchise, which was built to be a recruitment tool for and by the US Army, whose last entry back in 2015 was actually really well received. Like, it is just a good FPS, apparently. Now, to be fair to these adver games, they are largely from an era where gaming was seen as more of a periphery to other industries, like a way to prop up movie sales with tie-in games for critically acclaimed films like Cars, Cars 2, and Cars Race-O-Rama. Or there's even been TV show tie-ins, like my personal favorite show of all time, Lost, getting its own game that recaptures the feel of iconic scenes like this into scenes like this. But by and large, these adver games weren't really that successful. At least not when compared to real games made by real leads who had anything more on their mind other than to sell some Doritos. As it turns out, gamers don't actually want to pay to be advertised to. Or do they? Because brands figured out a better way of advertising directly to gamers. A way that not only doesn't cost them an entire game's budget anymore, but actually makes money in the process. This is the rise of the collab. Popularized by Fortnite over the last few years, I don't think I have to go that in-depth on this. You know, chances are if you're watching this, you know what these are all about. These massive media companies work out a deal with games to put their IP in their in-game stores, usually in the form of a character skin or some kind of special weapon. So hardcore elite gamers can finally pay $15 to play as the alien from American Dad. And in return, the company holding the rights to that IP get plenty of eyeballs on their brand to help sell tickets to the next Marvel movie or whatever. And it's genuinely genius how they were able to turn advertising into an event. Like, if the Super Bowl actually was only commercials. And now, countless big-budget live service games like Call of Duty have worked out a way to get you as the consumer to actually pay to be a vehicle to advertise their partner's Amazon Prime show or cartoon that went off the air in the 90s. Like, is that not fucking insane to anyone else? So, I don't know, man. If given the choice between ADOM being placed inside of a chicken joint with an outdated business model or being charged to be effectively a billboard, I don't know what I would pick. But probably the one that means I don't have to talk about Beavis and Butthead all the damn time.